Good. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to make a start now. So we are still on objective 2. Where is the syllabus? Alright, so we're still on objective 2. The history of game design and animation. So we already completed looking at some of the history of animation, and you guys were supposed to watch a few of those videos and continue reading what were the additional practices on Wikipedia. Those were two of your activities that you need to complete. And so today we're going to continue with history of game design. So this is actually one of the videos that you should watch also. Talks about how what aspects went into designing games in the past, and how it caused games to evolve over time, what elements were put into game. Some elements were actually accidentally put into games, and it actually became a standard today. So you're going to learn about those things in the video. Good. So as mentioned, we're looking at the history of game design. And Ariel, you could read the first 2 paragraphs for us.
History of game design. Since its commercial birth in the 1950s, as a technological oddity at a science fair, gaming has blossomed into one of the most profitable entertainment industries in the world. The mobile technology boom in recent years has revolutionized the industry and opened the doors to a new generation of gamers. Indeed, gaming has become so integrated with modern popular culture that now even grandmas know what analytics is. And more than 42% of Americans are gamers, and 4 out of 5 years also have a console.
Good, very good. So if we compare this to, remember I mentioned that there's a difference in the time frame when animation design would have started and when game design would have started. Around what time period did animation design started?
So around in the 1830s.
Right, very good. 1800s, 1830s, around that time period there. But if you notice here, game design would have started around 1900s, 1950s, around that time period. What was the explanation as to why there's a difference in that time period?
You need a computer for game design, and computers came about in the 1900s.
Very good, that's it. So you needed technology to play games, well, digital games, you can say. And computers technology only started growing or being developed around that period also. So they took the same computers and they made games with them. Good. So games are so popular today that it does not matter who you are. You could be the youngest person to the oldest person. You will always find somebody playing a game. Doesn't have to be a complicated game like Final Fantasy or Call of Duty. It could be a simple game like Angry Bird or Candy Crush. And even persons who aren't termed as gamers, like our parents or grandparents, they are playing games. Every minute you see them on the phone, you can see them playing some sort of one of those puzzle games, Candy Crush or so on.
Yeah, always with Candy Crush.
And you can always hear the volume on max. And you hear, wow.
For some reason, I don't know why. Oh, good.
So almost everyone today is playing a game in one form factor or the other. Good. So let's look at how game design would have evolved. So we have the early years. Zane, you can start reading that for us.
The first recognized example of a game machine was unveiled by Dr. Edward Aller at the New York World's Fair in 1940. The game, based on the ancient mathematical game of Nim, was played about 50,000 people during the 6 months it was on display, with the computer reportedly winning more than 90% of the games. However, the first game system designed for commercial home use did not emerge until nearly 3 decades later when Ralph Baer and his team released his prototype, the Brown Box, in 1967. The Brown Box was a vacuum tube circuit that could be connected to a television set and allowed two users to control cubes that chased each other on the screen. The Brown Box could be programmed to play a variety of games, including ping pong, checkers, and four sports games. Using advanced technology for this time, added accessories including added accessories included a light gun for a target shooting game and a special attachment used for a golf putting game.
Good. So let me analyze what we have read so far. So in the 1940s, this person would have created a game machine. Edward New York. I'm looking for the name. Ancient mathematical game of Nim. Alright, let's see if we can find a game to have an idea of what it looked like. Let's search for NIM. But those are documentaries. Which began from the 60s, Dr. NIM. Okay. Alright, well, you guys can look into that as to how that game will function. Because if you watch some of those history of games, that would have how games would have evolved, and I guess NIM would also be a part of that because that's one of the first games that would have been developed. Now, that was a game for more of a more commercial base. Now for Homebase, now that was until 1967 where we had the Brown Box by Ralph, and it connected to it was a vacuum tube circuit connected to the television set. It had users control cubes that chase each other on the screen. You could be used for playing ping pong, checkers, sports, and so on. Alright, Zane, you can continue.
According to the National Museum of American History, Baer recalled, "The minute we played ping pong, we knew we had a product. Before that, we weren't too sure."
Okay.
Magnavox Odyssey, the Brown Box, was licensed to Magnavox, which released the system as the Magnavox Odyssey in 1972. It preceded Atari by a few months, which is often mistakenly thought as the first games console. Between August 1972 and 1975, when the Magnavox was discontinued, around 300,000 consoles were sold. Poor sales were blamed on mismanaged in-store marketing campaigns and the fact that home gaming was a relatively alien concept to the average American at this time. However mismanaged it might have been, this was the birth of digital gaming we know today.
Good. So that brown box now was the introduction to gaming in the home. But it's one of those cases where technology was ahead of its time. Because persons did not accept it, it did not do so well. Now I'm sure you guys heard about the console, the Atari.
Yep.
Nope.
No? Well, it's not like if we would have had one, but it's actually a very popular name in the game console world because, as they claim here, some persons claim the Atari is one of the first game console. But as we see, before that, we would have had the brown box called the Magnavox Odyssey. But it's another game console, home commercial game console, that would have been created. So onward to Atari and arcade gaming, Ariel.
Sega and Kyoto, Kyoto were the first companies to pique the public's interest in arcade gaming when they released the electromechanical games Periscope and Krong Special Soccer in 1966 and 1967. In 1972, Atari, founded by Nolan Bushnell, the godfather of gaming, became the first gaming company to really set the benchmark for a large-scale gaming community. Atari not only developed their games in-house, they also created a whole new industry around the arcade. And in 1973, retailing at $1,095, Atari began to sell the first real electronic video game pump, and arcade machines began emerging in bars, bowling alleys, and shopping malls around the world. Tech heads realized they were onto a big thing. Between 1972 and 1985, more than 15 companies began to develop video games for the ever expanding market. The roots of multiplayer gaming has been noted. During the late 1970s, a number of chain restaurants around the US started to install video games to capitalize on the hot new craze. The nature of the game sparked competition among players who could record their high scores with their initials and were determined to mark their space at the top of the list. At this point, multiplayer gaming was limited to players competing on the same screen. The first example of players competing on separate screens came in 1973 with Empire, a strategic turn-based game for up to 8 players, which was created for the Plateau network system. Plateau programmed logic for atomic, automatic teaching operation. Remind. Was one of the first generalized computer-based teaching systems, originally built by the University of Illinois and later taken over by Control Data (CDC), who built the machines on which the system ran.
Good. So let's look at what we've read so far. So what we read so far is that after the Megavox, we had the Atari, we had arcade gaming, and then basically arcade gaming would have taken over. So, or they would have basically started with arcade gaming because the Megavox was a home-based game, but it did not take off because that was not something they were accustomed to. So they would have shifted to arcade gaming now. And with arcade gaming, persons became a little more interested in gaming. They would go out, they would go to a certain location, play the games, and so on. Now, in the 1970s, they would have started to introduce multiplayer games. And multiplayer games, that is actually a game design. Remember, we're looking at game design. What elements, what aspects were put into games that basically made it different from other games. So the fact that a game was home base, or the fact that a game was arcade only, that was a game design. The fact that it has multiplayer, and some games have single player, that is a game design there also. So they realize that persons, they like to play together, because some persons, yes, you enjoy playing alone, but there's more fun when you play with others. So they would have introduced multiplayer games where those players would have played on the same screen. Um, Multiplayer on separate screens would have been in 1973 with the game Empire. That would have been a strategic turn-based game. That is also another form of game design. Adding up to 8 players, another form of game design. Alright. Any questions on anything we looked at so far? Or any comments you guys want to?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Alright, continue the reading. Zin.
According to usage logs from the Plateau system, users spent about 300,000 hours playing Empire between 1978 and 1985. In 1973, Jim Bowery released Spasm for Plateau, a 32-player space shooter, which is regarded as the first example of a 3D multiplayer game. While access to Plateau was limited to large organizations such as universities and Atari, who could afford the computers and connections necessary to join the network Plateau. Plateau represents one of the first steps on the technological road to the internet and online multiplayer gaming as we know it today. At this point, gaming was popular with younger generations and was a shared activity in that people competed for high scores in arcades. However, most people would not have considered 4 out of every 5 American households having a game system as a probable reality.
Good. So something we missed earlier was the fact that they mentioned that in the multiplayer game, they were competing for high scores. That's another game design there also. The fact that you can play on this one system, you can have a certain score, and you can compare other person's score on that system.
Store the data.
Store the data, good. And with that fact now, it helped to add to the competitiveness of the game. It added more interest to the game, because now persons are going to be fixated that this person made this score, I want to make an even greater score, or I want to get the highest score. So those persons, they're going to be more attracted toward the game. That's a game design there now that would attract persons more towards the game and be interested in playing it. 1973, the game Space Sim. It had 32 players, another game design there. So most of those games, they would have been 2D games before, but now they started to dive into 3D games, and also connecting those games to a network so that maybe multiple systems can run at the same time, and even you can play, because I doubt whether you could have all of those persons could have played on the same system. So they must have had multiple systems connected in a network so that they could have played together. And that would have been the starting of the idea of online multiplayer games, another game design that we have today. So no longer, so that's like you could say that's a reason why arcade gaming has been phased out, because persons, they don't want to go to a central location. They don't want, some persons don't even want to go to their house anymore, much less to go to somewhere and then play a game at that location. They rather just be at home, turn on the game whenever they feel like, connect to the internet and play online with from the comfort of their home, play online with their friends or any person basically in the world. Good. Any question or comments?
No.
No, sir.
All right. So home gaming becomes a reality. I think it's Ariel's turn.
In addition to gaming consoles becoming popular in commercial centers and chain restaurants in the US, the early 1970s also saw the advent of personal computers and mass-produced gaming consoles become a reality. Technological advancements such as Intel's invention of the world's first microprocessor led to the creation of games such as Gunfight in 1975, the first example of a multiplayer human-to-human combat shooter. While far from Call of Duty, Gunfight was a big deal when it first hit arcades. It came with a new style of gameplay, using one joystick to control movement and another for shooting direction, something that had never been seen before. In 1977, Atari released the Atari VCS, later known as the Atari 26,000.
1000.
Alright, oh, but found sales slow. Selling, hmm?
Continue.
But found sales slow, selling only 250,000 machines in its first year, then 550,000 in 1978, well below the figures expected. The low sales have been blamed on the fact that Americans were still getting used to the idea of color TVs at home. The consoles were expensive and people were growing tired of Pong, Atari's most popular game.
Good. So when games would have started off, they would have been more commercial in businesses, in organizations, restaurants, basically popular places, malls, and so on that persons would go to. But now they wanted to shift the focus to design games for home use. So they developed the Atari, they developed Gunfight, and so on. Now, here they implemented a joystick for the gameplay, where you could have control the movement and even control the shooting with that joystick. But notice once again, just like the Magnavox, what was it? Yeah, the Magnavox. Just like the Magnavox, the sales was not so great because once again, technology ahead of its time, and then the fact that it was expensive wouldn't make persons interested in it. Not all persons would have had TVs back then, and you needed a TV at home to play the game at home. Even this was also a case even here. This they're talking about this in the 1970s, and even in Guyana around the 90s, in the 2000s, early 2000s, for some persons still didn't even had a TV. You had to go by one of your friend to play a game or to watch them play the game. Y'all have experienced that?
No, sir.
No.
See, I always had a game. That must be nice, man. When
Because I don't play.
in the 90s in Guyana, not everybody had a TV. Not everybody had a game console. So if you wanted to watch somebody play a game, or if you wanted to play a game, you had to go by somebody who had a game console, and you would either play with them or watch them play the game. And that's in the 90s, and they're talking about this happening in the 70s there. So we can see the difference in environment when it comes to these products. All right, continuing. Who was reading this here? I think Zane has to read.
When it was released, the Atari VCS was only designed to play 10 simple challenge games, such as Pong, Outlaw, and Tank. However, the console included an external ROM slot where game cartridges could be plugged in. The potential was quickly discovered by programmers around the world who created games far outperforming the console's original design.
Good. So one thing to take note here is that the game consoles would have had the games built in, but then they started to experiment with additional games having game cartridges, and they would have realized that is something they can work with. To add additional games, they could use additional storage cartridges to store those games on, connect it to the console, and they will be able to have additional games on the console. Last two paragraphs. Jane?
1200 PX Atari 2600 Lite 6er FL. The integration of the microprocessor also led to the release of Space Invaders for the Atari VCS in 1980, signifying a new era of gaming. Sales. Atari 2600 sales shot up to 2 million units in 1980. As home and arcade gaming boomed, so too did the development of the gaming community. The late 1970s and the early 1980s saw the release of hobbyist magazines such as Creative Computing, 1974, Computer and Video Games, 1981, and Computer Gaming World, 1981. These magazines created a sense of community and offered a channel by which gamers could engage.
Good. So remember they were facing an issue whereby these games they weren't being adopted by persons. Yes, they're making games, but persons weren't adopting them. Persons weren't buying them. Persons weren't making use of them. So they came up with the idea of having that community, developing the community, basically creating interest in the games. So they would have started developing magazines whereby they could have basically advertise or share information with the public so that they can build that audience for future games. Alright, personal computers, Ariel.
Personal computers, designing games, and opening up to a wider community. The video game boom caused by Space Invaders saw a huge number of new companies and consoles pop up, resulting in a period of market saturation. Too many gaming consoles and too few interesting, engaging new games to play on them eventually led to the 1983 North American video game crash, which saw huge losses and truckloads of unpopular, poor quality titles buried in the desert just to get rid of them. The gaming industry was in need of a change. At more or less the same time that consoles started getting bad press, home computers like the Commodore VIC 20, the Commodore 64, and the Apple II started to grow in popularity. These new home computer systems were affordable for the average American, retailing at around $300 in the early 1980s, around $860 in today's money, and were advertised as a sensible option for the whole family. These home computers had much more powerful processors than the previous generation of consoles. This opens the door to a new level of gaming, with more complex, less linear games. They also offer the technology needed for gamers to create their own games with basic code. Even Bill Gates designed a game called Donkey, a simple game that involved dodging donkeys on a highway while driving a sports car. Interestingly, the game was brought back from the dead as an iOS app back in 2012.
Good. So games weren't developing, games weren't pushing forward in terms of technology, so they basically had a crash. There weren't any new innovative game design that would have attracted persons. So when the computers came out now, when computers started to be developed, those persons realized that those systems they were more advanced than the game consoles. They could have processed a lot more data and handle more um, instructions and so on. So they realized that they could have used those computers as a means of playing games. So and even using the computers to develop games, as you saw there. Ariel, read the last three paragraphs.
Whilst the game was described at the time as crude and embarrassing by rivals at Apple, Gates included the game to inspire users to develop their own games and programs using the integrated BASIC program. Magazines like Computer and Video Games and Gaming World provided basic source code for games and utility programs, which could be typed into early PCs. Games, programs, and readers code submissions were accepted and shared. In addition to providing the means for more people to create their own game using code, early computers also paved the way for multiplayer gaming, a key milestone for the evolution of the gaming community.
Good. So I think we just learned something here. Apparently, Bill Gates developed BASIC, or BASIC was used to create that. I think Microsoft was the one that
Donkey.
developed BASIC.
Oh,
You know
I
what
will
is
not be
BASIC
able to
now?
answer that. Yes, yeah, I know it's basic. I did computer science. Unfortunately, I know it.
Who developed BASIC? Wasn't? Okay, it was John
How is
G.
regeneration though?
Kennedy, Clemeny, and Thomas E. Kurtz. Okay, and so Bill Gates would have used it to develop his games. Good. All right, Zian, continue reading.
Other early computers, such as the Macintosh and some consoles, such as the Atari ST, allowed users to connect their devices with other players as early as the late 1980s. In 1987, MIDI Maze was released on the Atari ST and included a function by which up to 16 consoles could be linked by connecting one computer's MIDI output port to the next computer's MIDI in port. While many users reported that more than 4 players at a time slowed the game dramatically and made it unstable, this was the first step toward the idea of a deathmatch, which exploded in popularity with the release of Doom in 1993 and is one of the most popular types of games today. Multiplayer gaming over networks really took off with the release of Pathway to Darkness in 1993, and the LAN party was born. LAN gaming grew more popular with the release of Marathon on the Macintosh in 1994, and especially after first-person multiplayer shooter Quake hit stores in 1996. By this point, the release of Windows 95 and affordable Ethernet cards brought networking to the Windows PC, further expanding the popularity of multiplayer LAN games.
Good. So, have you guys noticed so far what has led to all of the latest and greatest game designs that we have today?
Sir, could you repeat that one more time?
What has led to all the designs that we have today? Gaming at home, multiplayer, all the different genres of games. What has basically led to all of those um, game designs that we have currently today?
Mainly the Atari.
The Atari, okay. But I was more looking for that person's. Yes, Ariel.
Yeah, like they were just pushing to go further in
So
the gaming industry
good. Yeah,
to
that
do new things.
right. So they were trying to do something with the game, with the current game that they have. They were trying to do something with it. They weren't thinking that this is the next or latest technology or design that would come into play, but they were just trying to do something. What could I implement that would make my game different from others? So in this case, they connected games together. If you watch the video that I indicated at the start here, this video here, you're gonna notice that in one of the games, um, in one of the game design, someone accidentally came about with the idea or the game design that you can switch between genres of game inside of the same game. So games didn't only have to be one type of game. For example, platform games. Platform games are only supposed to be basically a 2D based game, and you are moving on different platforms, basically, just moving. But if you think about it, in games like Mario, it is a platformer, you're jumping on objects and so on. But the fact that you're going to go and attack something, that turns it into an action based game. So the person who was developing a platformer, they didn't even know that that was the case there. That's what they were actually doing. So simple changes in games or simple addition to games has caused us today to have a lot of the latest and greatest game designs that we have today. Different genres in the game, multiplayers in the game, and the other features that we have. Alright, the last paragraph's in the real evolution.
The real evolution in gaming came when LAN networks and later the internet opened up multiplayer gaming. Multiplayer gaming took the gaming community to a new level because it allowed fans to compete and interact from different computers, which improved the social aspect of gaming. This key step set the stage for the large scale interactive gaming that modern gamers currently enjoy. On April 30th, 1993, CERN put the World Wide Web software in public domain, but it would be years before the internet was powerful enough to accommodate gaming as we know it today.
Good. So they had the LAN parties. They would have to physically go and meet with each other in the same building, in the same room, to have their multiplayer games. But when the internet developed, when it started to grow, there that is when we would have seen online gaming. So the move to online gaming now. Ariel?
Long before gaming, giants Sega and Nintendo moved into the sphere of online gaming. Many engineers attempted to utilize the power of telephone lines to transfer information between consoles. William von Mister unveiled groundbreaking modern modem transfer technology for the Atari 2600 at the Consumer Electronics Show (CES) in Las Vegas in 1982. The new device, the CVC Game Line, enables users to download software and games using their fixed telephone connection and a cartridge that could be plugged into their Atari consoles. The devices allowed users to download multiple games from programmers around the world, which could be played for free up to 8 times. It also allowed users to download free games on their birthdays. Unfortunately, the device failed to gain support from the leading games manufacturers at the time and was dealt with a dead blow by the crash of 1983. Real advances in online gaming wouldn't take place until the release of the fourth generation 16-bit era consoles in the early 1990s. After the internet as we know it became part of the public domain in 1993. In 1995, Nintendo released Satellaview, a satellite modem peripheral for the Nintendo Super Famicom consoles. The technology allowed users to download games, news, and cheat hints directly to the console using satellites. Broadcasts continued until 2000, but the technology never made it out of Japan to the global market.
Good. So we started getting consoles, computers in our home, but now we wanted to connect to persons from different parts of the world. So they would have started to integrate that. So play games, download updates, and so on. Um, so if you notice so far, basically what we're looking at is like the hardware side of the development of game design, how the hardware basically would have developed. And this video, it considered some of the software aspect of game design, like the genre and the design aspects and so on, from 2D to 3D games and so on. So now we're at accessing the internet was expensive at the turn of the millennium. Zane.
Between 1993 and 1996, Sega, Nintendo, and Atari made a number of attempts to break into online gaming by using cable providers, but none of them really took off due to the slow internet capabilities and problems with cable providers. It wasn't until the release of the Sega Dreamcast, the world's first internet ready console in 2000, that real advances were made in online gaming as we know it today. The Dreamcast came with an embedded 56 kilobytes per second modem and a copy of the latest Planet web browser, making internet-based gaming a core part of its setup rather than just a quirky add-on used by minority of users. The Dreamcast was a truly revolutionary system and was the first net-centric device to gain popularity. However, it also was a massive failure, which effectively put an end to Sega's console legacy. Accessing the internet was expensive at the turn of the millennium, and Sega ended up footing huge bills as users used its Planet web browser around the world. Experts related the console's failure to the internet-focused technology being ahead of its time, as well as the rapid evolution of PC technology in the early 2000s, which led people to doubt the use of a console designed solely for gaming. Regardless of its failure, Dreamcast paved the way for the next generation of consoles, such as the Xbox, released in the mid 2000s. The new console manufacturers learned from and improved the next-centric focus of the Dreamcast, making an online functionality an integral part of the gaming industry. The release of RuneScape 2001 was a game changer. MMORPG, massively multiplayer online role-playing games, allowed millions of players worldwide to play, interact, and compete against fellow fans on the same platform. The games also include chat functions, allowing players to interact and communicate with other players whom they meet in-game. These games may seem outdated now, but they remain extremely popular within the dedicated gaming community.
Good. So These developers they started to want to integrate internet access, but once again, technology ahead of its time. Internet was expensive at that time when they were developing, so persons would not have adopted it. They would have been focusing more on their computers because computers were coming out at that time. So they would have focused more on their computer and that they could have used their computer rather than these consoles. Now, but the design of implementing internet access did not die out. Other companies really took it into consideration, learned from where Dreamcast would have lost or where they would have went wrong, and they came up with other ideas. RuneScape is actually a PC-based game. Let me check that out. I think it's a PC-based game if I'm sure. Android. Let me see when it was first developed. Like, RuneScape was originally a browser game built with Java, so it would have been used on the computer. So, as mentioned, persons would have been adopting the computer around this time. Persons had a computer, they could have connected the computer to the internet. So it's basically, why would I buy a console that I had to connect to the internet? I already have a computer. So RuneScape, using that on the computer now would have been perfect in terms of implementing internet-based game. And that's why RuneScape actually took off. So it implemented or came up with MMORPG, mass play multiplayer online role-playing game, which allowed millions of persons to play games, have interaction. The chat function would have been a game design, allowing players to interact, another game design, being able to communicate with other players in the game, another game design. So we're entering that digital age of playing games online. So where are we today now? Modern age. Because remember we're looking at the history of game design. What it was in the past, what is it now, what is it in the present, and what will it be in the future. So what is the modern age of gaming? Ariel?
Since the early 2000s, internet capabilities have exploded and computer processor technology has improved at such a fast rate that every new batch of games, graphics, and consoles seems to blow the previous generation out of the water. The cost of technology, servers, and the internet has dropped so far that the internet at lightning speed is now accessible and commonplace, and 3.2 billion people across the globe have access to the internet. According to the ESA Computer and Video Games Industry report for 2015, at least 1.5 billion people with internet access play video games. Online storefronts such as Xbox Live Marketplace and the Wii Shop channel have totally changed the way people buy games, update software, and communicate and interact with other gamers. And networking services like Sony, PSN have helped online multiplayer gaming reach unbelievable new heights. Every new batch of games, graphics, and consoles seems to blow the previous generation out of the water. Technology allows millions around the world to enjoy gaming as a shared activity. The recent ESA Gamer report showed that 54% of frequent gamers feel their hobby helps them connect with friends, and 45% use gaming as a way to spend time with their family. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare cover buys the time of the Xbox 360 release. Online multiplayer gaming was an integral part of the experience, especially deathmatch games played against millions of peers around the world for games such as Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Nowadays, many games have an online component that vastly improves the gameplay experience and interactively often superseded the importance of players' online game objectives. What I've been told as a blanket expectation in that 90% of players who start your game will never see the end of it, says Keith Fuller, a long-time production contractor for Activision. Yeah. As online first-person shooter games became more popular, gaming clans began to emerge around the world. A clan, guild, or faction is an organized group of video gamers that regularly play together in multiplayer games. These games range from groups of few friends to 4,000 person organizations with a broad range of structures, goals, and members. Multiplayer online platforms exist where clans are rated against each other and can organize battles and meetups online.
Good. So, do you guys play games that don't have multiplayer?
Yeah,
Do you like playing by yourself?
no.
Right. So that's the idea there. So that's the modern age of gaming. When you're gaming today, basically we reached an era whereby yes, playing single player games is nice, but we reached an era where it's so easy to play with our friends and families that we don't want to play those single player games anymore. We want to play multiplayer games, games that we can interact with persons, games that we can basically interact with anyone in the world and have that communication, that interaction, that collaboration, and work on that game. So that's kind of the focus of the game design of today. That multiplayer online factor there. Zayn, why it sounds like you don't play video game?
I don't play much, sir. And the
Why is
ones
that?
that play is like not really well known.
Okay. See, you weren't introduced to games, or why don't you play it?
Well, it's like a balance of time. I don't really find the time to like balance sometimes because games be addicting and you just want to be like playing the game all the time.
Right.
And the next thing you know, 6 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
half the day done.
Yes, because when
That happens at first, but after you played like a while, you get bored, so your gaming time will actually decrease. So I don't play as much games as I used to,
it happens
as in
over time.
gaming.
It happens over time when you're young and you're now into the game. You're gonna play it for a long time. You're gonna play it for a good couple of hours. But over time, when you're playing a game, you're gonna realize how repetitive it starts getting, and it does start to decrease your interest, and you actually don't play it anymore, or you don't even play it as long anymore. And we could say that is actually an issue with game. That's an issue with game design because if the game doesn't change or the game doesn't challenge you or the game doesn't motivate you to want to continue playing, then persons are going to lose their interest in playing that game. That actually happened to me with I was trying to play out what was the game? Hyrule Warriors. They made a new expansion. Um, any of you know what is a warrior based game? A warrior genre based game?
But I think I have an idea of it.
Like Warcraft and things like that.
Yeah, kind of like that. It's like you're one player. It's like a hack and slash. You're just fighting everybody in this area. So
Yeah, I know.
right. So Hyrule Warriors, it was basically like that. So imagine each game, all you're doing is hacking and slashing everybody. So it gets kind of repetitive, it gets kind of boring over time that all you're doing all the time is just smashing A and B all the time. That's all you basically do. So you can say that's kind of like a that's gonna affect the overall performance of the game because that you could say that's gonna be like a poor game design there because it's not gonna continue to catch the person's interest. Alright, we are 132. We just got two more things to finish out and we're gonna end for game design. The history of game design. So the move towards mobile, um, same.
Since smartphones and app stores hit the market in 2007, gaming has undergone yet another rapid evolution that has changed not only the way people play games, but also brought gaming into the mainstream pop culture in a way never seen before. Rapid developments in mobile technology over the last decade have created an explosion of mobile gaming, which set to overtake revenue from console-based gaming in 2015. Clash of Clans. This huge shift in gaming, this huge shift in the gaming industry toward mobile, especially in Southeast Asia, has not only widened gaming demographics, but also pushed gaming to the forefront of media attention. Like the early gaming fans joining niche forums, today's users have rallied around mobile gaming, and the internet magazines and social media are full of commentaries of new games and industry gossip. As always, gamers, blogs, and forums are filled with new game tips, and sites such as Macworld, Ar- Ars Technica, and Touch Arcade push games from lesser known independent developers, as well as traditional gaming companies. The gaming industry was previously monopolized by a handful of companies, but in recent years, companies such as Apple and Google have been sneaking their way up the ranks due to their games sales earnings from their app stores. The time killing nature of mobile gaming is attractive to so many people who basic games such as Angry Birds made Rivario 200 million in 2012 alone and broke 2 billion downloads in 2014. More complex mass multiplayer mobile games such as Clash of Clans are bringing in huge sums each year, connecting millions of players around the world to their mobile device or League of Legends on the PC.
Good. So, what is the key factor here that is attracting persons to games today? What are some key factors?
So the ability for them to like connect with each other online.
Good. Connect with each other, multiplayer. Good. What are some other factors? What about the device that you're using to play the game? Is that a factor?
Yeah, I guess so.
So, what do you guys prefer? Well, Zayn is not much of a gamer. What do you guys prefer? If you were to have to be, you had the time to invest in another game, would you choose a console-based game, or would you choose a game on your phone?
Console.
Console. Why console?
Well, in my case, my hands are like big, and playing certain games on this phone is not good. Well, it don't work out properly. But if not console, probably like a tablet that is big enough. But
Good.
yeah,
Good. So you prefer console because of the bigger screen, the bigger control. So that's
yes.
your preference to the game design. But there are other persons now who would want a smaller device, who wants a more portable device. So that's the other side of the game design now. Persons who want that, they don't want to pick up this big console, and when they're going somewhere, they don't want to have to take this console. They can have something in their pocket that they can take it at any time and play a game. And that's actually the future in which we're heading. You can play games on your mobile devices. So the same Call of Duty, you can play it now on your mobile device. And that's what a lot of persons are doing today. Um, it's actually kind of phasing out handheld games. You guys notice that? Smartphones are kind of phasing out handheld games. Like the Nintendo DS, the
Well, yeah. Yeah.
PlayStation Portable, PlayStation Vita, they're kind of phasing them out because your phone is kind of becoming that portable device now. You can actually run an emulator on your phone and run those games. You can download games from a store now. So mobile devices, smartphones, they're kind of like the future now because mobile technology is going to continue to get better. We're going to continue to get better CPU. We're going to continue to get better GPU in our smartphones. So mobile games are actually going to continue to get better. Look at the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch is so small, you could say it actually is a small size tablet, a 7-inch tablet, and it can play high quality games, game at 720 resolution, games at even 1080p resolution in that small size there. So mobile games or using mobile devices, you can say that is the future, one of the future for games. Or the last paragraph, the last part, the future. What is the future, Ariel?
The move to mobile technology has defines a recent chapter of gaming. But while on the move, gaming is well suited to the busy lives of millennials. Gaming on mobile devices also has its limitations. Phone screens are small, well, at least until the iPhone 6s came out, and processor speeds and internal memories on the majority of cell phones limit gameplay possibilities. According to a recent Venture Beat article, mobile gaming is already witnessing its first slump. Revenue growth has slowed, and the cost of doing business and distribution costs have risen dramatically over the last few years. Although mobile gaming has caused the death of handheld gaming devices, consoles are still booming, and each new generation of console welcomes a new era of technology and capabilities. Two industries that would well play a key role in the future of gaming are virtual reality and artificial intelligence technology. The next chapter for gaming is still unclear, but whatever happens, it is sure to be entertaining. Virtual reality company Oculus was acquired by Facebook in 2014 and is set to release its Rift headset in 2016. The headset seems to lean perfectly towards use within the video games industry and would potentially allow gamers to live inside the interactive, immersive 3D world. The opportunities to create fully interactive dynamic world for MMORPG in which players could move around, interact with other players, and experience the digital landscapes in a totally new dimension could be within arm's reach. There have been a lot of advancements over the last few years in the world of language processing, artificial intelligence. In 2014, Google acquired DeepMind. This year, IBM acquired Alchemy API, a leading provider in deep learning technology. In October 2015, Apple made two IA acquisitions in less than a week. Two of the fields being developed are accuracy for voice recognition, a technology, and open-ended dialogue with computers. These
All
advances
right,
could signify
Zane, you can continue reading. We give Ariel a
These
break.
advances could signify an amazing new chapter for gaming, especially if combined with VR, as they could allow games to interact with characters within games, who would possibly be able to respond to questions and commands with intelligent and seemingly natural responses. In the first in the world of first-person shooters, sports, games, and strategy games, players could effectively command the computer to complete in-game tasks, as the computer would be able to understand commands through a headset due to access and voice recognition accuracy. If the changes that have occurred over the last century are anything to go by, it appears that gaming in 2025 will be almost unrecognizable as to how it is today. Although Angry Birds has been a household name since release in 2011, it is unlikely to be remembered as fondly as Space Invaders or Pong. Throughout its progression, gaming has seen multiple trends wane and thrive, then be totally replaced by another technology. Next chapter for gaming is still unclear, but whatever happens, it is sure to be entertaining.
Good, very good. So, what is the future? Well, we have numerous futures. We're not sure what is going to happen with gaming. So, mobile gaming is a possibility because of its portability and because of the advancing in technology. Well, this is an old article. So, we now have phones that can run very high quality games, mobile devices that can do so. They have large displays and so on, but they still have the limitations. They cannot push high quality games like a game console would. So you can see game consoles is still also the future. Now, in addition to that, we have virtual reality games where you can immerse yourself into a virtual world, or you can have artificial intelligence where you can interact with an artificial intelligence so that you can have communication, interaction, or even build an artificial world in the real world. So all of that is possible. Build a 3D world where you can interact with it inside and so on. So those are some of the possibilities for the future. I think virtual reality games are growing. They're currently growing. We're in 2021 and it is growing. Is this year or last year, Facebook released another version of the Oculus Rift, and apparently it's getting a lot better in terms of virtual reality and interaction. So that is the overview of game design, the history of game design. That is the hardware aspects, remember. So the digital aspect, the software aspect, you can see. Watch the videos, look for other videos on YouTube, look at them also. Yeah, so remember we're looking at the history, the present, and the future. So the next class, we're going to look at what is the future for animation and some other future for game design. And then we're going to end off there for objective 2. Any questions before we end?
No, sir.
Alright, so that's going to be the end of today's class.